On episode 62 of Chit Chat, everything is canceled this year, but we still have the awards. The Spiel nominees are in, and well, we have some thoughts. We haven't played them all, but that's not going to stop us from talking about them and some other games we've been playing.
Welcome back to Chit Chat.
This is episode 62. What is like our fifth or sixth episode live? Maybe we can't keep track, but this week is all about the Spiel des Jahres. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the nominees came out. When did they come out? Earlier this week?
They did.
Like a day or two ago.
Came out earlier this week. We always try to talk about them on Chit Chat, so this is probably the most timely we've been with this discussion, and we do have some things to talk about. I think we agree in some cases. Maybe we disagree. I think some people have some ideas about what maybe could have been nominated that wasn't. And we'll talk about all of that and what we know of that goes into why they pick what they pick. But before we do any of that, do we have a winner? Did anyone do that before?
We do. This is going to, well, the game was Traintopia from Board and Dice, and it's going to, get this, Billy, Indiana.
Whoa.
Could it be more appropriate? Just email us at manversusmeeple@gmail.com to claim your prize. And this week we're giving away a copy of, again, timely, this one is going to be Nova Luna, which Kira's holding up. This is the brand new Spiel nominated game that's being brought over to the States from Stronghold Games. So did we review this one? I don't know if we did or not, but we've sure played the hell out of it and talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah,
it is definitely worthy of a nomination.
So should we start there?
So yeah.
Let's start there. We'll start with the Spiel. Like that's the main category everyone generally wants to talk about. So the nominees for that were Nova Luna, My City, and that's from Cosmos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then a game called Pictures. Who publishes Pictures?
PD Verlag.
Okay, never heard.
But I think Rio Grande
PD.
is bringing it over to the U.S.
Yeah, PD Verlag's done Concordia, which is a big one.
Let's start with Nova Luna since we were pimping that out this week.
Yeah, so I think I was probably the first one in our group to play that. I actually imported that from Canada because I was dumb enough not to pick it up at Spiel when Kira and I were there back in October of last year.
I kept walking by like, I really want to look at this game. I
know, but you know what the thing is? The funny thing is I didn't realize, number one, it was from Rosenberg, which I'm a huge fan of all of his titles. Well, for the most part, all of his meteor games. Yeah. And this falls very much on the lightweight aspect. But having played the game now, I've probably played this game a dozen times. That's no joke. It's just a really simple game to set up and play. Yeah, and it's just it's really kind of a mental puzzle, trying to get 20 of these discs onto these tiles and be the first one to do so. And by doing so, you're taking the moon tile up to three spaces around this rondelle, and then basically pulling one of those tiles and adding it to your board. It's a very simple game, and it actually plays really well at 2 players, but also at more players. So you don't lose anything or gain anything from having more players in the game, but it's just really, really fun. It's really thinky as well.
Yeah, I would say that this is kind of almost feels like a companion to Rosenberg's Patchwork, which came out a few years ago. The way that you're moving around that rondelle, both to set yourself up for some good turns and to block your opponent. Like, if you're a big fan of Patchwork, I mean, this definitely shares some of that DNA, except instead of collecting tiles to fill your board, you're collecting these cards and doing a different kind of spatial puzzle. It does feel a little bit, I think, a little deeper than Patchwork, and of course it goes to 4 players, so it's a good solution for people that like that. I've played it with 2 and 4, and it played really well in both instances.
Yeah, I would add to that. I played Patchwork. In fact, when Patchwork came out, I bought it for Alicia, thinking, oh, this would be a great game to play as couples. Neither of us liked it. Neither of us enjoyed Patchwork that much at all. But Nova Luna is completely different. So to comment on what Ryan said, if you like it, you'll probably like this. But even if you didn't like Patchwork, like me, you might like this, because this is a very, very good game. When Jeremy got it in from Canada, we played it, and it's very streamlined and very thinky, and it's got a nice little puzzle thing going on.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and it also has a solo mode, which I haven't played yet. Have anyone played it? We've got somebody asking in the comments.
Oh, I didn't know it had a solo mode.
Yeah, I actually completely spaced that it had a solo mode, and now I just want to check it out because I can't imagine it's that, I just imagine it's very quick to play the solo, just like it is the 2-player. So it'd be an easy.
Well, even I mean, the two-player games, 15, 20 minutes to play tops. And even I think I introduced this game 4-player, Kira, if I'm wrong, at IndieCon, to you and Andrew and Josh. And we played that 4-player in maybe 30 minutes tops, even with instructions. So it's fairly fast to play.
And Andrew and I had played it before because you and I had played it, and then I played it with Andrew, and then I think you just broke it out into IndieCon. But yeah, I just I don't think Josh.
Maybe I was just introducing it to Josh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the three. The next one we can talk about is My City, and this is from Knizia, who's very well known. Ryan, I'm going to let you talk about this because this was actually on your most anticipated list for 2020.
It was, and it still is because we still don't have a U.S. Release for it. But I know that they are sometime in the next couple months.
July,
coming out. So expect some content from us. But I'm really excited about it. I like those Tetranomino puzzles.
Did you just say Tetranomino? Triomino?
I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Those Tetra style pieces.
Okay.
I like the puzzle of playing those. And My City is kind of a basic game. Like David and I were talking before the show about the actual gameplay is simple, but the strategy of how to place your pieces is where the meat of the game comes in. And over time, it actually becomes harder, and you're adding things to your board in like a legacy component so that you actually have more trouble placing your pieces later on in the game.
I'm interested in this game too because it's legacy number one. But Ryan, have you watched any videos of it? Like David, how in depth of it is the game? Is it heavy? Is it light? I
think this is why. I mean, obviously the videos I watched don't go into much detail. I don't think anyone wants to spoil a lot of the legacy aspects to it. I don't think this is not like a narrative type thing. But of the legacy components I saw, you have a board where you're placing, and by the way, it's polyominoes is I think the term.
Polyominoes. That is the word I was looking for. Thank you, David.
But you're simply mechanically, you shuffle up a deck of cards. Everyone has the same buildings that they can place. There's a building of each color, and every color has the same 4 or 5 different buildings. Flip a card, everyone places that building. And there's some rules of where you can place it. You can't cross rivers with buildings. You have to place. You're trying to cover up rocks. You don't want to cover up trees, or you can't cover up trees. And you also want to cover up all your land spaces because every land space is -1 point, and then every tree or every rock is -1 point in and of itself. And some of those rock spaces have a couple of rocks and stuff like that. So it sounds like it's a puzzle. Now I didn't watch it enough to see whether or not. Maybe you'd play a session and someone could get themselves very poorly into a scenario where they really can't place well. I mean, you could kind of screw yourself up pretty badly, but I don't know if there's some rules that adjust that. But then the legacy component has you going to sort of this next scenario, and I think you're clearing your board. You're not leaving tiles or anything on your board, but you take out a sticker sheet and they're adding things like a well. So there's an area where you could place your well anywhere, and you could place it. And then in the next scenario, you also get bonus points if you're able to surround the well with 4 buildings or something like that. So I think it's going to give you more opportunities to score or different opportunities to score. And you can kind of develop your city compared to other players in a very different way.
Yeah, it definitely kind of, to me at least, has almost like a Tiny Towns vibe. Almost like Tiny Towns meets Carpe Diem. I don't know if... I know you guys all played Carpe Diem. I don't know if anybody out there remembers, but the positioning of those buildings, and every building has its own way of scoring points. So it's it becomes very difficult, like I said, very difficult to do your puzzle by the end of this legacy, which is what I'm really looking forward to. So it might start off a little on the simple side. I mean, this was nominated for the regular Spiel, not the Kennerspiel. So it is definitely a lighter game, but that doesn't quench my excitement to play it.
What I find interesting about this nomination and about pictures as well is both of these games have not been released here in the States, I think.
That's correct.
I don't even know how long My City's been available, but I think right now it's only available in Germany, nowhere else. Because I think all of us may have looked online to try to figure out where to get a copy of it, and it's the only copy I could find was a German edition. And I know that the American edition's going to be around July.
It's kind of strange because we were talking about this too before the show started about what the release window is, because I remember when I first saw My City back when we did our most anticipated, it was not widely available. So I'm not sure. I know it came out in 2020, but I don't know exactly when. So I'm not sure how it fits into that release window. But a lot of times we see some of the games out in America already by the time they're nominated for the Spiel. Not every time, but sometimes.
All right. Well, that's enough about My City. Let's talk about pictures. David, do you know anything about pictures? This one's from PD Verlag. I have zero idea again on who is bringing this one out, but it's designed by, I believe, either a husband and a wife team or a brother and a sister team because they have the same last name. I don't know anything more than that, but the game seems pretty basic as well, and you're using pictures and creating those with what, string in the game?
A whole bunch of different
Not just
components.
strings, so different
really?
things. You set the game up, and it kind of looks Codenames-esque. There's a grid of different pictures.
Yeah.
And then all the players at the table on any given turn have a different set of components to use.
Right.
And then everyone draws a token out of a bag that corresponds to one of the pictures. So there's like X and Y axes with like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you get a token, you see the picture that you need to depict, and then you need in front of you to depict that picture with whatever components you were given. So that might be string. It might be like some of them are like rocks and sticks. There's blocks. And then there's another one that's kind of interesting that's like a little frame that you can put 9 little, imagine like resource cubes from a Euro. Different colored resource cubes. You can arrange them so it kind of creates almost, you're trying to do like an 8-bit sort of colored version of a picture. Then everyone does that, and then everyone sort of picks, tries to guess, and you can get points for guessing right, and you can get points for people guessing yours right. So on one hand, it sounds like a fun party game. To me, though, it seemed like a mashup of a couple things we've seen. Like it's not like Codenames, but it is in that there's a bunch of things to pick from down there, and only you know what it is, and you're trying to get people to guess it. Mashed up with old 1980s and 90s games like Cranium and things like that, where you're using clay and Pictionary and stuff like that.
Well, so we're getting some comments, and I think it's probably worthwhile addressing. People are saying, oh, these games all seem kind of light. That's the intention. If you actually read it, it says those who play games but aren't heavily into the gaming scene. So these games all, to me, seem appropriately light for that demographic. And that's one of the main things they're keeping in mind when they make these decisions for who to recommend for the nominations in the first place.
Yeah, and to give you guys a reference, the past 2-year winners were Just One, which is a game from Asmodee, and then Azul won the year before that, both of them winning the Spiel des Jahres. Both lighter, very approachable games. So these do fit that niche that you're talking, Kira, where they can be played, obviously, by people like us who are into board games, but also they are very approachable for people that may want to walk into a big box store and grab a game as well and teach it to their family. So that makes sense for all these nominees. Now, having not played 2 of them, I don't know where they're going to fall. What about you guys? Like, where do you feel the winner is going to come from, and why do you think so? And I'll start with myself, and I'll let you guys go after me, and then we can switch it up later. My pick is Nova Luna, and the reason why is because, number one, I don't think Rosenberg's won that many, and he got a special nomination a couple of years ago for Agricola, which is just too heavy of a game. Most of his games fall really on the heavier scale. Those are typically the ones I like as well. I love him as a designer, and I am super surprised. I'm still super surprised to see his name on that game because, as I just said previously, when we were at the Spiel or Essen last year, we walked by this game a half dozen times, and each time we would say, oh, that looks really good. Should we play it? And we were like, no, let's keep going. Having played the game now, it's still in my collection, this has been, last year and this year has been the years where I bought far less games than I've ever bought before, and I'm calling a lot more games. I don't see myself getting rid of this game. I have not played My City, and I probably won't play Pictures because that's just not my style of game. My City, being a legacy game, I'll definitely try it, but legacy games are one and dones. And so you have to know that going in. I don't know if they're going to pick a one and done game. Pandemic, I think, may have been one of the few legacy games that have ever won the Spiel. So that'll be interesting to see their choice there on whether or not they decide to do that. But Nova Luna, from just my experience with the game, is the clear winner for me.
Yeah, I don't know. Just to comment on that last thing you mentioned, I was wondering when you said Legacy, if a Legacy game had won, and I just dialed this up here. It looks like Pandemic Legacy Season 1 was nominated, but it lost to Isle of Skye that year. And that was for the
Kennerspiel, right?
Kennerspiel also, not the
But the Spiel does give out special awards too, and I think Pandemic Season 2 won one of their special awards one year. So
they give judges awards and things like that too.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they do go ahead and award a Legacy style of game. But again, from my experience, Nova Luna is the clear winner for me.
Kira, what do you think?
Well, I'd also like to say to everybody watching, feel free to let us know what you think the winner, or who you think the winner will be as well in the comments. For me, I don't know. Like, I look at across all of them, and one of the things being accessibility seems to be important when you look at this game and what comes in this box. My pictures is 3+. My City is 2 to 4, whereas Nova Luna is 1 to 4. So it allows, it's accessible to a single player. I think that gives it a little bit of a boost. I think Rosenberg hasn't won a Spiel yet, and I don't know, deserves one in my opinion. Like, he makes great games. So it's the one I'd like to win. I honestly don't know which one will win. We were talking about this ahead of time. I think I had reasons for all of them that I think that they could win. But of the three, for me, I would love to see Nova Luna win. I love the game quite a bit. So that's me.
Well, I happen to know exactly what one is going to win.
There you go.
I wasn't supposed to say anything, but I'm going to. No, I do have I feel confident though. My pick, I think, would be with you. Like, my choice, my personal choice. I really like Nova Luna. Again, having said that, I've never played My City.
Yeah.
But based on what I've seen of My City, I still think Nova Luna, like Jeremy, you were saying, it'll be in your collection, even if you don't play it frequently. I think Nova Luna guaranteed will be one of those games that when you do get it to the table, and plus you can get it to the table so easily. That could be a game that a couple plays before breakfast or like after dinner really quick and just get it done. Yep. And I guarantee if it's been 6 months and you play that, you're like, oh man, I forgot how good that was. Like, you'll have that reaction to Nova Luna. With that said, I think My City is likely going to be the winner. Reasons why. My biggest reason why is after watching a video of it being played, it seems like it's got that extraordinarily low entry point of how you play it. Like, there's depth for, doing well at it, but playing it in and of itself, which I think is typically very important to the Spiel nominees, is simple. You're just flipping a card and placing a tile. In fact, when I started watching the video, I was immediately asking myself, is this really
all there is to it?
All there is to the game? It seemed unbelievably basic. So I'd be really interested to see if it starts that way. And then by the time you get through the Legacy, you're like, oh my God, that was awesome. That would be an incredible journey for something so basic to be so compelling in terms of depth by the end of your play, which I think could lead to its win. Pictures, like I said, seems a little, I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels,
done that.
It feels very similar to things we've seen in the past.
Well, and just to jump in really quick on the My City conversation from the comments, we have somebody who's played it, and they've been commenting here that that maybe at the beginning it feels that way. Maybe the judges only played a game or two before they made that decision. I don't know. I assume they played the whole game through.
I would imagine.
I would have to think that they wouldn't nominate one with like a couple games under their belt.
But they also pointed out that it is heavier weight, at least what people claim it to be, because you know it's all user ratings on BGG, but weight-wise, it's heavier than Cartographers. So it's not that light.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier, too, with this. My City is like, sure, it's probably going to start out pretty light. We played Betrayal Legacy a few years ago. That's another one that started out just at the same lightness level as regular Betrayal. But then by the end, we had all these different layers of things going on that it became quite a heavier game. And I can see that with My City maybe the actual gameplay becomes or stays very simple as far as like look at a card, place a building. But when you're facing all these different decisions of what you can do with that building or where that building can go, it could become a very brain-burning experience. And honestly, I think that my city probably has a good chance to win. I mean, Knizia has a great repertoire of games, and he's well liked. And there's been a lot of buzz coming about my city from overseas.
Absolutely.
That being said, pictures we haven't played, and I know it's very easy to write this game off, but I remember that I wrote just one off when I first saw it, and I said, how fun could that game be? Until the first time I played it, and I said, oh, it's that much fun. And a game like Pictures, which sounds, I don't know, it sounds
silly.
Like it could just be silly, and okay, we're just making these paintings, but the challenge of trying to replicate these paintings and like, are you trying to build a building within the painting? Are you trying to make the shape of the actual painting? Like, it could be fun. I mean, I wish we had gotten a chance to play that one because it's one of those games that I can't comprehend how fun it's going to be. I remember.
Well, and I think
I would 100% agree with you. Like I said, except for the fact that it seems like something we've already played before. It doesn't like if no one had ever done anything like that, I would say it's a shoo-in, like guaranteed Pictures is going to win. But it just feels repetitive.
Is there any games before we move on to the Kennerspiel that you guys feel that are on the lighter side that maybe could have been nominated? We'll go through this quickly. Ryan, is there any games that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I was actually surprised not to see Parks on the list. Now, that might be because it's possible Parks didn't have a German release, or it's possible because it does kind of feature American national parks. Maybe it didn't hit with the same audience. But to me, that feels like the same ease of play, gateway level game that like would be perfect. Wingspan, or not Wingspan last year, just won one last year, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Parks is any harder to play than My City or Nova Luna. So I would have liked to see that nominated.
Yeah, I would say Parks. I don't have any other ones just that I can think of that I would have nominated above and beyond these. I probably just not thinking any. I would say Parks if that were in the mix. I would peg that more as a Kennerspiel game than a
it
Spiel.
Might. The lines between those are so blurred anymore.
Well, and that's something we're going to talk about here in a second because some of the nominees seem very similar to the nominees we just talked about.
Well, I don't have any. Kira, do you have any?
I was actually I was thinking of the one you mentioned before we started the episode, which is Res Arcana. Is not, I think, probably would qualify for everything that all the buckets being ticked, in my opinion, of being the right kind of game for that audience. But it still allows that meteor experience for a gamer, but being light enough to pick up very easily. I know I've introduced it to several entry-level gamers or non-hobby gamers, and they all enjoy it quite a bit. So that'd be one that when you said it, it instantly stuck in my head as, oh yeah, I forgot that definitely did come out last year. So
I think that's a good segue. Well, I was going to say, that's a good segue because I wanted to point out Res Arcana was actually judge recommended for the Kennerspiel this year. It didn't actually win a nomination, but we were talking about how the judges give out prizes. That did win one, but you're right. I could have seen that in the Spiel category just as easily as the Kennerspiel category. And I know Jeremy has a lot to say about that.
Well, and I don't even know what the cutoff is. That's the thing. I don't know where these things land in the cutoff. That's the one thing I'm not sure on.
Let's move over to the Kennerspiel. Okay. So the Kennerspiel basically translates over to English as the connoisseur game, which is more of the gamer's game, so to speak. Last year, the winner was Wingspan, which I think all of us universally agree was probably the best game of the year. And then I'll say Carpe Diem and Detective. Surprisingly, the Portal Games was also nominated. This year, we have 3 games. We have Cartographers, A Role Player's Tale, and then we had Die Crew or D Crew or whatever you want to call it, The Crew here in the States. D Crew, and then The King's Dilemma. All of them you couldn't ask for a more wide range of games that are included this year. The good news is that we've actually played all 3 of these games. Yeah. So we have our own perspectives about these games and maybe some other games as well. David, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to let you start talking about The Crew because I know you really enjoy the game. You love trick-taking games. They're like second nature to you. So you have a lot to say about that particular one.
Well, first things first, to me, I don't understand why this is in the Kennerspiel and not the Spiel. Because, like, in terms of weight, like, this seems lighter, in my opinion, than potentially Nova Luna and My City.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe they're taking into consideration there's people out there who don't play a lot of trick-taking games. And if you've ever taught a trick-taking game to someone who's never played a trick-taking game, you'll appreciate how complicated it can be for someone who's never played one. But I still wonder why it's in the Kennerspiel. With that said, I do love this game. I haven't played all the way through. In fact, I've only played a few of the first scenarios. We haven't had it, or I haven't had my copy very long. But it is a very interesting game where you're cooperating to try to take the right tricks, and people are like kind of effectively signing up to take tricks at the beginning of the round. The other thing this game has going for it is, I think, like you said, Ryan, about My City having a lot of heat and talk about it. Die Crew, when it hit Essen last year and since, has had a ton of heat. It had an incredible amount of heat late last year. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was at PAX bumping in to Ted from Bezier, and I said, "What have you been playing?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't play too much." "Oh, but I did play this." And he couldn't remember the name of it at the time, but he was talking about this game. And then the very next day, I bumped into Tom from Dice Tower, and he was gushing the same amount about it. And I had to wait until this year to play it. But it is a solid game, and I do think it's probably, of these three, it would probably be my pick for what I think will probably win.
I'll mention this. I think there's two things that deter me from this particular game. And I've only played it once, and I know that it's extremely popular, but there's two gateways to this problem. First is that it's a 4 and up player game. Like, you have to have 4 people. Like, I can't play this.
You can definitely do it at 3.
Sure, you can. Sure, but you can't play this casually the way the game is meant to be played without having a number of players there.
Sure.
The bigger gateway for me is that trick-taking games are not naturally conducive to learning. They're not super easy. They require a very specific type of person to do well. And I've played trick-taking games with my wife, and I love her to death, but she is not good at trick-taking games. And if you play with the wrong crowd, this game falls incredibly flat. Like, you have to play with the right crowd of people. Where some of these other games, like, anybody can play Cartographers. Everyone enjoys writing on a piece of paper, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone likes talking at a table in a game like King's Dilemma. The Crew, it takes a very high level of thinking in this game to really do well. And some people aren't going to like that. I know my wife doesn't like it. I know other people in my neighborhood won't play this game with me just because it's that style of game. And I don't know if that's going to weigh on their minds or not, but that's the gateway I see that people are going to have to get through in order to like the Crew.
Well, let me ask you a question. Based on what you just said about the Crew and looking at the other 2 nominees, I have a hunch as to what your pick would be.
Yeah.
Would that be Cartographers?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to say anything else about the Crew?
I do.
Anyone else
mean,
I've played a lot of it,
ahead,
actually.
Ryan.
Kara, go ahead, though. No, you go.
Okay.
Ladies first.
Well, we saw it at Essen, and it was impossible to get in for a demo of it. There was zero standing room around to even get barely close enough to even watch people playing it. It was super popular, and we definitely were keeping an eye on it, but I just kept going, I'm so confused. I'm so confused by this concept, this cooperative trick-taking game. And then a friend of the channel, Andrew from Board Game Quest, got a copy early from Germany, and we played it with translated rules from BGG. And I mean, it was fine for me, and I think maybe because it was at 3-player, to Jeremy's point, it needs more players. It didn't wow me by any means. I don't traditionally love trick-taking games anyway. It was interesting, but I don't know, not my cup of tea.
See, I'm opposite of you guys. I've played a ton of it, and while I do see Jeremy's point for sure, because I have played it with people that are just checked out on trick-taking, and they're just throwing cards, and they have no idea how to solve the puzzle, and it just makes for a bad experience. But when you have a group of people that are good at the game or skilled at the game, it really does sing at that level. But that is a hurdle. I completely agree with you. If you don't have that group, it falls flat. But when you do, I can see why people love it, and we've really enjoyed playing it. We have the same group of people that plays it over and over again, and we've lately been playing it on Tabletop Simulator because we don't have, we can't physically play it. And it's hard. I mean, when you get up to some of the higher levels, it becomes like a truly difficult puzzle to solve. And if the committee is playing it in that environment, I could see it winning potentially. But again, if they're having bad experiences playing it, then it won't. Like it almost reminds me of the mind, in that the group you're playing it with is almost as important as the rules of the game itself.
Sure.
All right. So to answer your question, go back to David's question. He asked me which one I thought would win. I don't know if I think this one will win, but I think it probably is the most obvious choice, and that's Cartographers. There have been so many roll and writes, like they're a dime a dozen right now. This is a really good one. Like it's really smart. It's really fun. It's got enough variability in it to make each game different. Plus, it puts people in charge of their own style of game. Like you can write however you want on the board, and it's just a really fun experience. Plus, like I said, the learning curve in this game is significantly lower than the crew, especially for trying to be good at it. Like all you need to do is know how to write on a piece of paper, and then it's up to you to figure out that personal puzzle yourself. And I think that the trend of rolling rights, has any rolling right won? Because if not, this may be the first.
Well, Gonshan Clever won.
Okay, Gonshan. Well, that's probably the only one, right? Out of
I think so.
Huge list of them lately. But plus, Ryan and Kira, you just played this recently
live,
right?
And David, I think.
And David, yeah. Yep. All three of you played this game. Like, I imagine you guys didn't not have fun.
Oh,
like
we had a
you
blast.
cannot not have fun playing that game.
I've always had fun playing Cartographers.
I hated every moment.
David, that was
us after
mainly
all.
because I was playing with Ryan and Kira. So
that was one of your first times playing, David, right? I've played it a lot. I think Kira has.
I played it a couple times before, but I will say I've played that game more since quarantine on tabletop or Tabletopia than I'd played it before.
Yeah.
And it is actually a very good experience on Tabletopia. In fact,
yeah, it really is.
As good, if not better, than in person now that I'm so used to it. Yeah, I would agree with everything you're saying, Jeremy. The one thing that bugs me about this game in this category is that it feels to me, and this is a completely different subject really, it feels like the Spiel is spilling over into the Kennerspiel. Like, if this wins the Kennerspiel, then it's going to be two very, very basic games. And that has happened before in to some degree. But the other two games here are easily more layered. Even though Die Crew is easy to play, it is a thinky game. And like you said, it can probably not land well with certain players, just like any trick-taking game.
Well,
if you ever play a trick-taking game and you look across the table and politely go, why did you do that?
Right.
We've had a number of people in the comments say
understand.
that they feel like these should have been switched with the Spiel and Kennerspiel should have been.
Some of them
should have been.
I would agree with
do,
all of that except for King's Dilemma.
Right.
Well, and Pictures is pretty light. I would keep Pictures where it is, but last year it was just one and Wingspan. Okay, that made perfect sense. Those games were very different weight categories. But you're right. If Nova Luna and Cartographers win, I would put those equal. Like, there's nothing really that much more complicated in Cartographers than Nova Luna, really, as far as like learning and playing that game. So you know what? We're not in the room where it happened, so I have no idea how they go about splitting these up. But I expected to see much heavier games. Not that I love Cartographers.
We'll get into that. I think it's safe to say that we all like Cartographers.
Oh, yeah,
so we all think
exactly.
it's a valid nomination.
That's the game we all like the most.
Let's go to the King's Dilemma, because we all feel predominantly the same way about the game. I'll start. I was really excited for this game. And I think, again, this game falls in that same lump as the Crew. You have to have the right group to play this game to truly enjoy it. This isn't a typical board game. It's not like you're moving pieces to do a lot of stuff. This is a true negotiation, get into the role of your character, legacy style game. What it's doing is really unique. Like, there's not any games really that do exactly what the King's Dilemma is doing. And I wish that we had the right group to play this game from start to finish. However, the experience for us, it felt kind of flat. And I don't know if that's because the mechanics just didn't gel with the type of gamers that we are. But I acknowledge that there's a lot of cool things going on in this game. It's really neat to open that game up and see all the different legacy aspects to it and all those envelopes and all those different paths. It's like a choose your own adventure for a group of people to play at the same time.
Well, I think that's what you just said is key. And I think that if we came back to it it would be different. But when we sat down to play, we sat down as gamers, right? We looked at that game as, how do I win? How do I get my pieces where I need them to go on these little dials? Because every decision you make in the game impacts these dials. And I'll admit, I'm guilty of that as well. I was looking at these cards that came up, and I was voting based on what's going to get me the most boxes to check so I could advance my character. That left for a very dull experience because there's not a lot to that aspect of the game. But when I've talked to other people that really got into it, and they approach the game more like a narrative-driven, like role-playing game, where it's like
a shared adventure, a
shared adventure. They weighed these decisions. They thought, what is best for the people? What is like, am I being selfish here? They didn't worry about what their character sheet did. They kind of let their decisions reflect that, and whether or not they got XP or not, whatever, they were involved. I know I talked to Gloryhound from that channel, and they like were costume and everything when they came to the table. Like, they were fully into it.
Kat plays RPGs and stuff too, though, and she, like, she loves getting in character. And I think if you guys remember when we played this, I attempted to really enjoy the enthusiasm of the narrative, because that's one of the things I enjoy about it. But it did just be kind of like, it was hard to enjoy that part of it when it was just so, I got to tick these boxes. And I think if we had all maybe approached it a little differently, we would have had a different experience. But I still think at the end of the day, it fell really flat for me. And I don't know that would change. There are other games that do those little bits and pieces that I get more excited about, that I would rather be playing. So I was surprised to see it here. I do want to bring up something that Gator Dave has said in the comments here. And should the SDJ have this much clout in the industry here in the States, or at all? What do you guys think?
In my personal opinion, whoever wants to step up and topple them, they should. But until then, the Spiel is the award for sure. And I would say, even though that over the years, and I've been sitting here this whole time having the wiki open with all of the past years, even though we've criticized a game here and there and had questions, just like we have tonight, I would say overall, there's not a lot of huge, like, disgraceful nominees or winners on any of these lists. I think these are all like, okay, it's not my kind of game, but I get it. I understand why that game wins, or maybe one game over another. It does err on the side of simpler. Like, I think what we've been getting at is, if they had more difference, more of a differential between the connoisseur game and the game, I think that would be meaningful. Now, again, this is to us, like Americans. In Germany, where they've been doing this and where they've been, board games have been a much bigger part of like everyday living, maybe these things make a little bit more sense to how they've, differentiated the types of games they play. I mean, there's a children's game of the year there too, and that's obviously very important to them. We're not even talking about it tonight. I mean, that's how important that is to us.
Well, David, so I think you hit the nail right on the head when you talk about the difference in ethos regarding board games in Germany. Board games are a commonplace thing. I've talked to friends in Germany that they grew up, they would have game nights, they'd play games like Agricola are like just family games that they gather around and they'll play Agricola. Like, we're not there yet in the United States. And some groups have tried. We have the Dice Tower Awards. We have the Golden Geeks. We have the Origins Award. Gen Con has the Ennies. I think the difference is, first of all, it's hard to pay attention when there's a bunch of different categories. And that is not a criticism, because I think it is important to break these games down. But when you're looking at the Spiel Awards and it's just, boom, these 3 categories, it's very eye-catching. It's very easy to understand. And since these games do tend to veer towards the lighter side, more people are playing them, more people are talking about them. Mm-hmm. So while the Dice Tower Awards might go to, heavier games that we enjoy, the mass market is probably never even heard of these games. And I think that makes a big difference as to why the Spiel is still so popular.
Yeah.
Is there any Kennerspiel possible nominees that you think they may have overlooked? There's 2 games that I'm thinking about.
Oh, sure.
Bring it on.
2 games that I think, first game is Hodari, which I think is a really solid, medium weight, like light Civ building game that's just really good. And it's really fun with those small little box expansions. It just adds something more. It's not over the top. It's not hard to learn, but I think that's the perfect game that could be nominated for that category. But the big one is Watergate. Like,
yep, that was mine too.
Watergate is easily, outside of Wingspan, probably my most played game in the past 5 years. Like, I play that game all the time. It's so freaking good. Like, it just gets smarter and smarter each time that you play it. And I understand that it's based on U.S. history and not German history, which may be one of the roadblocks in the game, but the core mechanism in the game itself is awesome. Like, it is super fun. It's like Twilight Struggle distilled down into a little 20 to 30 minute experience.
Yeah, and
I love it.
To your point, like, I would say, like, King's Dilemma is, I'm sure, a great game for the right people. I don't mean to say it didn't. I just, there are, to what you're saying, like, there are other games I think maybe should have squeaked past it, and Watergate is definitely one of those. And while Watergate may be based on U.S. history, the game did not originate here, right? It was licensed here by Capstone, so it actually came from Frosted, didn't it?
Well, I don't know. Matthias Kramer is the designer. I don't know where he's. I don't think he's U.S. based, but I actually have no idea where he's from.
So one thing I think it's interesting that it's a U.S. game, but it's not actually a game that originated here first.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that's not what's holding it back. Again, I'm looking at this list again, and here's the theory I would put forth. I'm not seeing any 2-player games over year after year after year after year after year on this. And my guess is, given some of their attitude towards, like, we want things to bring families to the table and this and that, it's possible they might have an internal rule. It's like, oh, it's 2 players, no. Which is interesting because on the flip side, like we've identified today, they have games here that require more than 2 players, which is often a turnoff for us. But like Jeremy, you pointed that out with Die Crew. And the King's Dilemma, I would say, I don't know how many it requires, but that game definitely benefits from a higher player count, I would
Absolutely.
think.
Absolutely.
Well, what I was talking earlier, I mentioned this with Res Arcana, but I looked at the 3 games that were given like the judges awards, and that was Paladins of the West Kingdom, Res Arcana, and Underwater Cities. All 3, I think, could deserve to win Kennerspiel. Like, if I was going to see a nominations list and those were the 3 nominated games, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I think Paladins and Underwater Cities both definitely deserve to be on this list. And Res Arcana probably could have even slipped onto the Spiel because it is pretty easy to play. So I think that's kind of strange to me that a game like King's Dilemma and The Crew, meanwhile Underwater Cities not even really nominated. Those are great games. Now, it's possible they're too heavy and that's why they just got judges nominations. But if that's the case, it's strange that an entire category of heavy games is just completely ignored by the Spiel awards.
As the hobby has gotten at least medium to heavy or heavier, it is interesting. And I do think, I mean, the only thing that's weird about that to me is I would typically say, I wouldn't expect those to be nominated. But then you look back and when was it? Terraforming Mars was nominated in 2017. Yeah. And I would put Terraforming Mars that's right there in the same weight
exact
category.
Same weight, yeah. Absolutely.
So it is interesting. I'm guessing Terraforming Mars got that largely because it was such a phenomenon at the time. Also, it was hard you couldn't ignore it. And I think more of the mainstream Underwater Cities and Maracaibo haven't been Terraforming Mars. Obviously. I mean, they're great games.
Looking back at these awards, in what world in 2014, in what world does Istanbul beat Concordia? Like, I don't even understand that. Like, that doesn't register in my mind.
Istanbul is so easy to play and learn, whereas Concordia
and Rococo. It also beat Rococo.
Yeah. That year is a strange year because in the Spiel category, the Spiel category, Splendor lost to Camel Up, and like Splendor to me, it was the Azul of its time. When Splendor hit, it was so easy, accessible. None of us really play it much anymore, but that year, it was hard to ignore Splendor. Seems like 2014 might have been maybe their biggest misstep.
Yeah, I can't believe Concordia does not have
in our opinion,
our nomination or a win. Like Concordia is like maybe my number 1 game of all time. So that's a surprise.
That's interesting too, because those aren't necessarily light games. Istanbul, Rococo, and Concordia.
No, it's like they've gone lighter and lighter through the years.
It really does.
Going back down. Yeah, they're making it more accessible for people.
2 years ago, Quacks won, which I would call Quacks a pretty light game. Quacks of Quedlinburg, I'd call a pretty light game.
as well. So it's interesting. There must be something with the way the judges perceive these games. We don't get a lot of insight into how these nominations work.
Yeah, there's just like
the fact
not even a full sentence about it on.
Right.
I know.
Just the fact that there's such a wide gap from year to year as to the weight and accessibility of these games makes me think that there isn't really a rubric. It's just kind of maybe what the judges that year decide is too heavy, right?
Might be.
I don't know.
All right, so that's did we pick winners? Did we say who we thought might win?
I think we all kind of. Well, I think of in that category, I'm sticking with Die Crew. I think will win, although I personally would probably prefer Cartographers.
Ryan, who do you think?
I would agree with David, actually, exactly the same. I would say I would like to see Cartographers win, though, but I think it's going to go to the Crew.
Kira?
I gotta say, it doesn't make sense to me for the Crew. I feel like these games want to be accessible, and you have to have at least 3 players. So I say Cartographers.
I hope Cartographers wins. I think we may see a dark horse with King's Dilemma just because it's so absolutely different than anything we've seen before.
That's a good point.
And I think the people that love this game really, really love it.
They do. It's divisive.
So, yeah, we'll see.
True.
Anyway,
it does have a passionate fan base.
That's the Spiel de Jahres. Let's talk about briefly, what we've been playing over the past week. Ryan, what about you? I see you have Azul set up once again behind you. Is that game 150?
This is actually Summer Palace. This is the new one. So
yes.
we're going to play after
Ryan's
this.
quadrant on screen is brought to you by Next Move Games.
Yeah, I was. We were going to play it after this.
He had to ditch the capstone hat, so he had to find somebody new, right?
Plus, I think all the Azul games look good. But no, I haven't played it recently, so I'm excited to get back into it. But we did recently play a couple games online. We played Tribune, which is being re-released by Stronghold Games and Spielworks on Kickstarter, which is a few years old Euro worker placement game. I don't want to talk too much about it because we did do a paid live play, so I know people don't like to hear your opinions necessarily. But you can see the game. It's a little on the light side. It was way lighter than I expected. When I saw this massive rule book, I thought it was going to be the heaviest brain burner, but in actuality, it was fairly medium actually to play. And then I'll let Jeremy talk about it, but we played
Tawantinsuyu. I'll let David talk about that one.
Somebody will talk
about it. We promise.
I bet Jeremy's going to talk about Tekenyu, so I will take the other T game, Tawantinsuyu. Tawantinsuyu is the next one from Board and Dice. I think this is coming out later this year. I wanted to say they pegged October, right?
Well, I think they originally had like a Gen Con release and then an Essen release, but of course,
so I think they're looking late this year regardless. This is a Terzi game, right?
Yeah.
It is.
And this is a brain burner game. And I'll tell you right now, if you've ever watched Chit Chat or heard any of us talk, that is not usually my cup of tea. Like stuff that hurts my head thinking about it. I also am somewhat prone to AP. I'm sure these guys are snickering right now as I say that. But this game is very simple to play, like we say about a lot of games. But oh my God, is there so many things to consider as you're playing, and there's so many places to go. There's a lot of like little things that you have to do to calculate, okay, where can you go? Because I don't know how many spaces there are on the board, but I'm going to guess there's got to be 100 or so different spaces.
Like 70 some.
70 some different spaces that you can place one of your guys, and then it can do a number of 3 different actions, and it might be able to do them multiple times depending on whether you placed it next to similar colored meeples and this and that. But you absolutely have access to every single one of those spaces if you want to pay for them. And you have to pay some of your resources to do that, which is cool because it opens it wide up. But, on the downside, depending on how you look at it, it can make for a crippling sort of like, oh my gosh, what can I do? I can go anywhere. And then there's all these like icons to look at. With all that said, I loved it. Like I found myself really enjoying this game. Probably even more. We played Tekenyu recently. I love both of these games this year. For whatever reason, Tawantinsuyu had just an ongoing satisfaction when you're doing your turns. It really felt like you were doing things and moving things forward. something that I really enjoyed. Now, I also happened to get some really good cards and buildings out early that let me get some cool synergies that really. So a lot of my turns, I was able to take advantage of some things I'd done early game, which made it that much more satisfying. But I've played it at least twice now or more on Tabletopia, and I'm looking forward to teaching it to more people for sure.
How much area control does it have, David?
Area control? It's not really
area
control.
No, it has a little bit. Those conquest spaces. There's those you want to have the most claimed, but I would never call it an area control game.
It's an area majority. So there's an element where you can actually take some actions in order to conquest, and there are these 4 spaces in the corners of the board where you can get a lot of points. And it's interesting you point that out. In fact, I'll backtrack. Obviously, there is that area majority. The crazy thing about this game is you can score your points in so many different ways that you could go for conquest, or you could, like me, not really pay much attention to that at all and score your points in very, very different ways.
That's what I was going to mention, because I thought it was very interesting. There's several different mechanics going on here. David, you won by putting together tapestries, which I think is a really brain-burning kind of strategy. Yeah. Meanwhile, Jeremy was very close, and he took a lot of high priest actions, which is another thing you can do. And I was kind of in the middle doing a lot of worker placement actions, and all 3 of us, we came within 20 points of each other at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was really interesting that Jeremy took that strategy. He would usually be the guy to kind of...
I took 3 worker placement actions the entire game.
Right. Yeah, you'd look at this board and think, oh, you're going to place a ton of guys. Jeremy placed 3 guys the whole game. All he did was this silly little thing running around the middle of the board. And, we wondered it early, like, can you play that way? And Rainer from Board and Dice told us, like, yep, you can do that. And Jeremy did. You were second and pretty close.
Yeah, we were all pretty. I mean, only 20-point spread.
Yeah, it was good.
It's pretty good for that level of game. And I talked to Tertzi afterwards. He says, like, because he also designed Anachrony, and he puts these games at the same level as far as his own beliefs go. And I think maybe it's a little simpler to approach than Anachrony, but that brain burning sense is definitely there more than Tekkenu. But that's a game that you're not always in the mood for. Tekkenu is a little less brain burny, so I feel like I could play it more frequently.
Tekkenu is more accessible.
Before we move on to that, because that's what everybody wants to hear about as well. But there was a question that I answered in the comments with "You don't want to know." I missed out on this game, and I'm not going to lie. You guys played with 2 very heavy AP players. How long did it take?
Jeremy and Ryan.
The question.
Yeah, wherever he is, over here somewhere.
I know.
I don't know where he is on my screen.
This guy,
right here. I will say that I can AP, but this game, and I thank you, Ryan, for acknowledging it. This was far more about the things I was doing on my turn. Jeremy did an AP because he moved one or 2 spaces around the middle of the board. If I'd taken that strategy, it would be very simple. But I built this tapestry that I had to run, and it was like this big, long combo of things firing off.
Yeah, so our game started at noon. It was an hour teach. Yeah. It was a long teach.
It was a long teach.
And then we finished at 4:30. So
3.5 hours.
It was a 4.5 hour day of playing a game.
I do want to point out, everything takes longer on Tabletopia.
Yes.
That's so true. Like the teach takes longer, and the play and that's just the nature of not being able to look at everything at once and not being able to touch everything at once. Like it just games take longer, and that's.
Before we move on, the last thing I want to say about how much I like that, we did that in the afternoon. I taught it again myself to 2 new players that evening.
Wow!
Nice.
So I turned right around and played it again. And I will say it also still took about 3+ hours.
So you're there till like 2 in the morning.
It was not early. I mean, or it was early the next morning. Yes.
All right. So I have 2 games that I'll talk about. The first one is Raiders of Scythia, I believe is the name of it. It's the it's something like that. It's the new one from Garfield Games. Shim Phillips, who did Raiders of the North Sea and Paladins of the West Kingdom. I don't want to say it's a dumbed down version of Raiders of the North Sea, but that's what it appears to be the first time you play it. I've talked to Shim since we've played it, and he said it's a deeper, more streamlined version of the game. It's basically Raiders of the North Sea. You're placing a worker and then you're pulling one off. So you're doing the exact same actions. However, what they do in the game is a little bit different. The thing I really enjoyed about it was that you now have animals in the game. And as basic as that may sound, they go above as an eagle or below as a horse on one of your crew that you have, modifying those abilities in the game. So how you recruit them and how you use them is important to your strategy. It's a very fast game. I taught Kira to play, and then we played the game in about an hour. So it didn't take a long amount of time to play through it. It's Raiders of the North Sea with some extras.
Would you say that is it eagle and horse? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Would you say those animals reminded you of the Artisans expansion in how those cards were used to decorate your buildings or to enhance your people?
A little bit.
Do you feel like the DNA was there?
It's different for sure.
Okay.
It's different because it's adding strength or abilities to either worker placement spots or to the crew themselves. So it kind of enhances your crew of people in unique ways. And there's a lot of cards. Like all of the stuff, you have a giant stack of crew that mostly have unique abilities in them as well. So I enjoy that. I like Raiders of the North Sea anyway. But Tekkenu is the one that I've been playing a lot of. I've played the game 5 times now. And we have a pretty good near final prototype of the game. This is the first
components that are not in the game, right?
Right. I mean, this is the first time that I have, since my Drakkenstrike days, that I've actually scripted a single review. I'm just doing the review on it. They're going to give their commentary as far as scores at the end of it. But I enjoy this game so much. Like, I really, really like what Tashini does with all of his games. It is not complex in normal terms for a Euro game. It falls somewhere in line with maybe a Teotihuacan as far as how hard it is to teach the game and how hard it is to learn the game. But playing the game just like Tawantinsuyu, it's very simple because you're just drafting a die to use either as a resource value or to use it basically as a god action. There's 6 different gods, and they all do something very, very different in the game. But it's not just that. There's so many other things that you have to take into consideration in the game. You have to worry about the pip value because that die that you draft goes on a scale. And at the end of every 4 rounds, you're evaluating the pure dice compared to the tainted dice. You also have to worry about the rotation of the sun because the dice that you don't draft can no longer be available or may be available in the next round. So you have to worry about that. You have to worry about what other players are doing and which dice they may draft because they may take positions on the board that are first come, first serve. So you have to worry about that as well. There's a lot of things to consider. But probably the most important thing, and I'll get to this in my review, was the fact that you can't do everything in this game. And that's my absolute bar none favorite thing about any Euro game. Yep. A game that allows you to do everything that you want to do in the game is not a fun game to me. Like, everyone's going to do the same thing, and they're going to do exactly that. This game, you have to pick a path. You have to go down that path, and hopefully it pans out. There's ways that you can deviate from that path and still get points, but you have to make a plan. And really successful plans are going to win you the game, and I love that aspect about it. I love at the end of the game that after 16 rounds, that I wish there was 18 because I wasn't focused enough to do exactly what I wanted to do in the game, and that's what really fascinates me about this game. I really, really like it. Like, this is bar none probably going to be my 1 or 2 game this year, unless something comes out and just totally surprises me this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I wanted to comment on something you just said, because what I really like about Tekkenu is the same thing, where you do have to pick a path and follow it. But if you realize your path is taking you in the wrong direction, you can still course correct, as long as you're smart about it. There are some games when you get to a certain point in the game and you realize, I just can't win. And I've played several games now and I've never felt that way. I've always felt like there was something I can do to catch up to the person, or, just shift my strategy a little bit, because everything, like all the systems of this game are so interconnected. It doesn't appear that way when you first sit down to play because everything is segmented in its own little section. Each of the god actions is its own little area on the board, but they reflect each other and refer back to each other in so many cool ways that you can branch your strategy into multiple paths. And I think that's why I will keep coming back to it, because I want to play again already. I would play tonight just to experience some more of those different strategies.
So there's some questions about the game length.
Yep.
When we initially played this game, it was also on the 3.5 hour mark for a 4-player game with the teach. We
I
just
get on
played.
Tabletopia, by the way.
We just played with 2 experienced players. Kira's played with me before. My wife's played it 3 times now. And we sat down to play last night, and we played a full 3-player game at 65 minutes. So we're not really super AP players.
Although we probably could have cut like
super fast.
15 minutes off.
I did. I had 2 turns where I took about 3 minutes because I was just beating myself up over on what to do. But yeah, it can play fast too if you have the right group of people.
Well, once you don't have to teach it, sure, yeah.
Yeah, teaching is the thing, and that's what I always find myself doing with everything. The one thing too I'd say about Tekken that I really think is a must for these games for us to really get excited about them is there's a hook. Like every time I taught Tekken, when you are explaining that thing about taking the dice and then balancing them between the tainted and how the shadow on the obelisk works, everyone who's an experienced Euro player will go, "Oh, that's cool."
Right.
Like that's a really interesting thing, and how that balance works then at the end of each phase. And like you said, Ryan, the way things interconnected on that it's not obvious at first glance, but as you play, like I remember the first time you play, you're like, "Oh, wait a minute. I need this. Yeah. How do I get this again? Because I need it over here to do the thing I want to do. And to get that thing, you go over to this area and do that thing. And it's really interesting how it's all connected around that entire pie.
Well, and I'd only played the one time on TTS or Tabletopia or whatever it was with you guys, so it'd been a while since we've done that. So the rules reminder was so quick and easy for me to pick up. I did pretty good too. I was only like 7 points behind you, Jeremy, which I was a little shocked about because he kept blocking me, and I kept going, "Why are you doing that? Like, this is not a game that I'm going to win against you. This is one of those that Jeremy always destroys at," and you just kind of anticipate it. Then we got to the end of the game. I went, "Oh, I see. If he hadn't done that, I actually would have won." One of the 2 things he did to block me. I just needed the one thing. The other thing I wasn't paying attention to, so it didn't matter. But the one thing that I did, I was like, "Ah." So it was nice. It was a tight game overall. I think actually no, Sarah was a little bit behind.
Sarah was pretty fun.
Yeah. But it was
but
really
she doesn't
fun.
She's not nearly as much of a gamer either.
They're 2-player games. They were much closer. So
I mean, this is the year to me. Like last year was the year of Capstone. They had an incredible string of games. This year, Board and Dice has Tekken. They have Tawatensuyu, and let's not forget Dark Ages, which I fell in love with. I love that. It's a Civilization style game that's coming out.
And then I'm sure they've got another Escape Tales coming.
Yep.
Which are also
what's the Japanese game they have coming out?
Ito.
Yeah, Ito, right?
Yeah.
That looks really great as well. I haven't gotten to play that one, but man, their lineup is making me miss conventions, that's for sure.
It's killer lineup. Kira, what have you been playing?
Oh, I was waiting for Ryan to start talking about Dawn Shade.
Oh, I did. I wasn't sure how much time we had left. I did get to play Dawn Shade. This was one that we had been looking forward to. I got to a prototype because we did a preview. It was not, I'll say this, it was not what I was expecting when I sat down to play. I thought this is going to be too many bones. Honestly, just from looking at it and hearing them talk about it, it is not. Anybody out there that looks at this and thinks that it's got a level of like lightness and just like gaminess that Too Many Bones doesn't have. You're often breaking to play mini games that are having you flip chips in the air and throw chips onto the board and roll chips with your fingers and spin chips and just like all play card games and like liar's dice or whatever. There's just all these different little things that are happening within this core game that are a lot of fun. I think people need to maybe not write it off just as a Too Many Bones clone, because there is
seems like there's a lot. I mean, that was a hefty box you got, man, of game.
Yeah, I think it's actually one that we would have a lot of fun playing. But again, you got to play with the right group, like we talked about, because some of those mini games get a little silly and goofy, and that's just kind of supposed to be the fun of it. So you have to really embrace that.
Yeah. So
I don't want to talk about this thoroughly, because I do want to talk about it maybe a little bit more in depth next week when more of us have had a chance to play it. But we did get Dead Reckoning from AEG, which is the next card crafting game from John Clare. And to me, this is the best one. Now, does it have some of the same things that you may not like about some of those card crafting games? Because some people think that's a little fiddly. Sure. But to me, this game makes so much more sense as you play it than those games. And I liked those games all right. This game, it just feels more like a good traditional deck builder, and it feels like the way this card crafting system should work. And I love the theme, and I love the fact that you can play it very accessibly. I played it with Alicia this last weekend, and you're literally taking pirate ships out into the ocean, exploring them on tiles, and going out to those tiles to pick up the new cards that you're putting in and crafting into your next cards. Sure. I had a lot of fun with it, and I played it with Jeremy really quickly the other day, just yesterday maybe. But yeah, hopefully we can get this to the table and all of us can comment.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of pirate games, so that's obviously what I'll talk about because Tiny Epic Pirates, we did a preview for, which means it showed up and I was super excited. And there's nothing better in the world for me than a new Tiny Epic game. And I wasn't sure on this one because we've had a lot of pirate games this year, like a lot.
Yeah.
Enough that this week on the Rewind, and I don't know if any of you guys want to join me this week, but I'm definitely going to cover all the crazy amount of pirate games we've been talking about and playing very recently. But they all do something a little bit different. I think that's what's really great. We played Forgotten Waters, we played Sea of Legends, we've played Dead Reckoning now, and a bunch of others. But
Feed the
Kraken is another
Feed
one.
the Kraken.
So many, and
Forgot
there was
about
even
that.
2 previews we did in January for pirate games. I noticed. So, but for me, Tiny Epic Pirates does something that Black Fleet. I don't know if anybody ever played Black Fleet. It was this cute little game, and I was like, "Oh, so excited!"
I remember Black Fleet.
Somebody who showed it to me, I really enjoyed it. I bought it, and then I played it again with another group of people, and all of a sudden I was like, "Ugh, it's just not quite what I want." And the cool thing about Pirates is that it brings in that pick up and deliver, but it also has this little rondelle thing with these captain's actions and these crew cards that have those bonus actions at the bottom. And if you're in the right spot and you have the right crew and captain set up, those combos are super satisfying. And so it becomes much more than just a pick up and deliver game, which can be very dull. Pick up and deliver games can just get very tired. This doesn't get tired. I played it at a couple times at 2 now, and I'm looking forward to playing it higher player counts here very soon. The solo I haven't gotten my hands on yet. It's Tiny Epics are one of the few games that I actually am interested in the solo because they do it very well. But yeah, I love Tiny Epic Pirates. I'm excited for it. More Tiny Epic, yay!
Now I know we've been going for an hour here, but I'm going to give us a little more time because there's 2 things I want to talk about. One, David, you just started a D&D campaign with us.
Yeah.
And I know you just wanted to briefly mention that we started rolling our characters, and I've not played D&D.
Oh my.
For at least, well, it's been probably since I've been out of college. To date myself, that was in 96. I probably played from 96 to 2003, 2004. So it's been about 15 to 16 years since I played D&D. But we had a blast last night rolling our characters.
Just rolling our characters.
It was a blast.
Your characters, anyway. Yeah, I've been threatening everyone around me and myself with running a D&D campaign, even though I've never really played a D&D campaign. The most I've ever played was like that Wednesday night encounters thing at the friendly local game store a couple times. In fact, I drug Alicia to that early in our relationship. I have no idea why I'm married to her now because I'm surprised she didn't run for cover then. But that's a story for another time.
She's not here today, as far as I could tell.
Right.
She was a little bit.
She's here.
Oh, she is. I missed her.
She just commented.
Oh, there she is.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm here.
So anyway, I've been wanting to do this for a while. I have books upon books and reading, and I've watched so much content because I want to run this thing, and I've clearly never DM'd. So I got together this ragtag group of people. I drugged Jeremy into it. He probably was the one that came in kicking and screaming. He said yes, then he said no, then he said yes, and I said, "Are you doing this?" And he's like, "Fine." So then last night we had a blast. I think everyone had a really good time. It was Jeremy, Rob from Blue Peg Pink Peg, Patrick, also from Blue Peg Pink Peg, formerly. He's not on there anymore, but he's there in spirit. And then Dan Nitch, a local friend of ours, who, interestingly enough, is also in the band who plays the music for Blue Peg Pink Peg. So there's a very Blue Peg Pink Peg-centric group. I'm DMing. They're the four characters. We'll probably bore, if we love this, we'll probably bore you guys with some anecdotes of our experience. But Jeremy's playing a human ranger. Yeah. Rob is playing a dwarven bard. Dan was I think a human fighter, and he's a former gladiator. And then Patrick is playing a high elf cleric. And I'll save it for the next time, but his backstory is ridiculous, as you might expect if you know anything about Patrick. So
And
hopefully we'll have some fun doing it.
A Rook and Raven, if you're DMing. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I just discovered the Rook and Raven not too long ago, and it makes me want to jump in. They have these beautiful DM books, and they have all kinds of different setups for depending on what type of DM you need to be or need to set up for, what kind of game. And I keep looking at them. They catch my attention so much. They're beautiful books, but they are specific to running a campaign, and I don't do that. So, well, maybe we have to get you one so we can ooh and ah over it a little bit.
The reason why I brought up our D&D is to segue into board games, because we're going to be soon covering role player adventures.
Yeah,
kind of
right.
role playery, right? Yes. So we got these beautiful books, and I'm not supposed to show you book 2 and book 3 of, I think, 13 books. So I'm going to show you anyway. So here's this, and here's his. He's not going to mind. Okay. So these are 2 and 3 of the adventure books. When we got this package, it's enormous. Like, I had no idea that Role Player Adventures was going to be this huge narrative adventure. But you're actually, I mean, if you're familiar with the game, which I already love the game, I think all of us love the game. We've all played it. You're actually rolling characters, and you can see this character sheet. Look at this. The character sheet actually tucks in there. So you're going to be writing character stats and changing them through the course of the game. As I said, it's going to have a narrative adventure, plus you have this book of encounters. You have all kinds of other books, which I'm actually not going to show you because I really can't talk about those. I probably get in real trouble. I'm probably going to get trouble for these anyway, but I'm super excited for this game. I love Keith's stuff. And if you aren't familiar, Cartographers, which was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, was also in that same universe and from Keith's team over at Thunderworks. So this is going to Kickstarter. Anyone know? Is it June, July? Is it June?
June or July?
So we'll have content.
I have it somewhere.
We'll have some kind of content up before then. I'm hoping to play with some of you guys, but
the lockdown is like at the end, so we should be able to start filming stuff again soon.
But if it's not, it is a one-player game as well. So I may just force.
He's gonna just play without us. Do the same thing he did with Tainted Grail, and we'll just have to sit back and wonder.
So, speaking of Kickstarter, right before we let Jeremy sign us off here, we wanted to mention tomorrow we have another episode. We weren't sure we were going to do one again this week, but Jeremy and I just decided earlier tonight, hey, let's do it again. We're going to have an episode of Killing It on Kickstarter tomorrow at noon, live stream where we're going to talk about a few games. In fact, I think we'll go ahead and tell you the games. We're going to talk about Hell.
Mythic.
It's absolutely
gorgeous.
Pardon the expression, Killing It on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Hell, is it Adventures in Neverland?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one is Clinic, and I'm just gonna tease you with that because we're gonna talk more about those tomorrow on the show.
Well, we'll get a preview URL up for you soon, and we'll stick that in our Discord for everybody. For those of you who aren't on our Discord, be sure to join. You'll see the link in our description below, and I'll hand it back over to Jeremy.
Yeah, so guys, make comments below. Let us know what you think either should have been nominated or who do you think is going to win this year's Spiel des Jahres, both for the Spiel and the Kennerspiel. If there's any games you have questions that we discussed tonight, make those in the comments as well. And also, you're going to be entered to win, just as Kira showed us, a copy of Nova Luna, which is nominated on that list, and a fantastic game because we've all played it before. And until then, take care, be safe, and we'll see you guys soon.
Bye-bye.